Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. Let's transition to what, as I said off the top of the show, is, in my opinion, probably the single biggest winner of the college football weekend, and that's the University of Florida. Because when you look at the situation across college football, as I mentioned, quiet week, Clemson's on a bye, Ohio State, Alabama, Texas A&M, Georgia, their games get canceled. And so it gave a nice showcase for a lot of different teams, right? Great weekend for Indiana. They beat Michigan State. Everyone's like, oh my goodness, this team might actually be pretty good. Great weekend for Notre Dame, by the way, who I thought in reality might have a step-back game, might have a letdown game, I guess would be the right way to put it. Weren't going to be up for playing at Boston College after they beat Clemson. They largely dominated that game. But I felt like there wasn't a single bigger winner on Saturday than the University of Florida. Because the University of Florida, I think they've been kind of dancing around the conversation of, are they a college football playoff contender? Are they not? What's the deal? What's the scoop? And they play Arkansas at home, and they completely dominate Arkansas. One of the best performances that we've seen from a team, one of the best performances that we've seen from a player in Kyle Trask, and get a very convincing 63-35 win. And I think in doing that, Florida established itself as one team. They are now the proverbial team that nobody wants to see going forward, right? And that's not a knock on the other elite teams, right? That's not a knock on Clemson or Alabama. It's not saying people are like lined up excited to play Alabama. But I think when I look at Florida, they were a team that was kind of on the fringes of, well, if everything breaks right and who knows and what's going to happen and if this goes right and that goes right and there's this tiebreaker and maybe they'll be in the conversation. They lose to Texas A&M. We kind of forget about them. But the last 2 weeks, I feel like they have put their foot down. And they said, wait a second now. You want you already got Clemson, Ohio State, and Alabama in the conversation. We added Notre Dame after they beat Clemson. Don't forget about us now. Oh, by the way, you added A&M, who beat us. But don't forget about us. Because we are here, we are ready to compete, and we are ready to play, and we are ready to challenge for one of those 4 playoff spots in the college football playoff. Not saying they'll get there, but I think they threw their hat in the ring of saying, if you're not including us in this conversation, you better make sure to do so. And if you watch Saturday's game, it was just a masterclass. It really was. And for Florida, I think they had a lot of the same questions coming in that, frankly, I had about Notre Dame, right? Notre Dame gets this incredible emotional win against Clemson last week. Are they going to come out flat against Boston College? The same with Florida. You play your biggest rival. It's a team that's had your number. Kirby Smart was 3-0 coming into this game last week against Florida in his time at Georgia, which means that basically there's nobody really on the roster that's ever beaten Georgia in a rivalry game. You smoke them. And then you come out and you play a really good Arkansas team, and I thought Florida was going to come out flat. Instead, jump out from the gun, completely dominate. It's 35-14 at halftime. You look at later in the game, it's 56-21 at some point, and so don't let the 63-28 final score fool you. 63-35 final score fool you. Florida completely dominated this game, and it was against a really good Arkansas team, which was 4-2 or 3-3 coming into this game, 4-2 overall. Let me backtrack. Arkansas was 3-3. They should have been 4-2 because they should have beaten Auburn. And they were 6-0 against the spread, which means that they have played games closer all season long than Vegas had anticipated that they would. And so when you look at this domination by Florida and you look at what they did last week against Georgia, I just think they're in that conversation of team nobody wants to see. It starts on the offense where Kyle Trask is just, look, I mean, I'm not the first person to say this. I'm not claiming it's an original thought. But if you don't have Kyle Trask at the front of your Heisman conversation, you're not watching college football, right? 6 touchdown passes on Saturday night against Arkansas, 5 in the first half. And on the season, how about this for a stat line? 70% completion percentage, 2,100 yards passing, 28 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. And it's not as though he hasn't played good teams. Texas A&M, really, really good. Georgia, we thought was one of the best defenses in college football, and Kyle Trask sliced them and diced them. And again, you get an Arkansas team on Saturday that was playing really good overall. I know Sam Pittman wasn't in the building. I know he was at home with COVID, but it doesn't change the fact that Florida beat a really good team on Saturday night in the Swamp. And so when I look at it in the bigger picture, it goes back to what I just said a second ago. I think they are now absolutely in the conversation. Because, you think back to earlier in the season, right? First couple games, they got this great offense, but can they stop anybody? Ole Miss is able to move the ball against them. South Carolina is able to move the ball against them. And then you play Texas A&M. You lose to Texas A&M. You have the COVID outbreak, and you kind of think like, wait a second now. This is just like a fun offense. Like, they're kind of quirky. Dan Mullen's kind of saying some stuff. He's wearing the Darth Vader mask. But the last 3 weeks since they came back from COVID, beat Missouri 41-17. And as somebody who watched that game, it wasn't even that close. Missouri scored a bunch of points late to make it seem even closer than the 24-point final score indicated. Then you go play Georgia last week, and that was when I really started to think, wait a second now, Florida's right here in this conversation. Because they fall down 14-0 to Georgia, and you think, here we go again. Georgia's beat up. They're down a bunch of guys. Their best cornerback got in a bike accident. And they're still beating Florida. And then Florida rips off before halftime, 38 points. They take a 38-21 lead into halftime and never look back. And that's when I sat there and said, wait a second now. Maybe their defense ain't the 85 Bears, but when you can score at the level that they can score at, you can compete with anybody. That's exactly what happens. And then to go on at home and beat Arkansas the way that they did was just really, really impressive to me. And so I think when you think about playoff teams, I think it's what I said a minute ago. We all kind of have Alabama in one of those spots. We all kind of have Ohio State in one of those spots. And I think we kind of understand, like, Notre Dame beat Clemson, but Clemson's going to get Trevor Lawrence back. They'll probably beat Notre Dame, and they'll split their 2 games, and those are probably the 4 teams. And if you want to start talking about other teams that are on the fringes, you probably got to start with Texas A&M, which actually did beat Florida to their credit. So to the A&M fans, get off my back. I'm not saying that your win doesn't mean anything. I'm just saying that A&M was kind of that other team that was in the conversation. There's a little Cincinnati buzz, a little BYU buzz. Wisconsin dominates Michigan, which we'll get into in a second. And I just look at Florida and I say, man, that is the team that I do not want to play. Because the offense is so explosive, veteran quarterback, confident in what they do. The run game is getting going. They actually ran the ball really well the last against Arkansas on Saturday night. And I think the defense is coming around. Like I said, I think it's hard to sit here and say, well, they gave up 35 points to Arkansas. Yeah, but if you watch the game, Arkansas had basically 21 points through 3.5 quarters. They put up 2 touchdowns late. And so I think when you factor in all those things, this is a team that seems to be getting better every week. And I think in the broader perspective is a team that can challenge and play with just about everybody in college football, right? Like, I think we all have Alabama just penciled in as the SEC champ. I'll tell you this. Florida feels like the one team that can go score for score with Alabama and keep it competitive. Do I think they can definitively win? I'm not saying they can definitively win. I do think Alabama has certain advantages. I think they run the ball better with Najee Harris. I think not having Jalen Waddle will eventually catch up with them, their best wide receiver. The defense has been hot and cold, but playing better. But I think if you gave Nick Saban some truth serum, I don't even think it's a debate. I think he knows how tough Florida is and how tough they could create a challenge for him. And I think when you look at it, again, in the bigger picture of even that, you don't think Florida could step on the field with Clemson and compete? Like, no disrespect to Clemson. I know they didn't have Trevor Lawrence. They got pushed around at the line of scrimmage. They're not this physically dominating team that they have been in years past on both lines of scrimmage. Notre Dame actually dominated them largely up front. You go beyond that, Ohio State. I think Ohio State has been, in certain areas, not as strong as their team and coach and program and fans expected them to be. So all I'm saying is, I'm not saying Florida is going to make the playoff. I'm not saying they're unbelievable, they're unstoppable. I'm just saying, like, if you look at Florida, you look at what they've done, you look at who they've beaten and how they've beaten them, I think they are the team that is trending in the right direction. And like I said, they are the team that nobody is going to want to play down the stretch. If they're going to make the SEC championship game, I think they can give Alabama a tough game. And who knows from there? Maybe they beat Alabama, win the SEC, and who's to say? But the broader point is, I think they are as tough, if not tougher, than people are